Welcome to the Unstoppable Recording Machine Podcast, brought to you by 2 Notes Audio Engineering. 2 Notes is a leader in the market for load box, cabinet, and mic simulators. Gone are the days of having ISO rooms or having to record an amp at ear-bleeding volumes to capture that magic tone. The Torpedo Live, Reload, and Studio allow you to crank your amp up as loud as you want, but record silently. Check out www.2-notes.com for more info. And now your host, Eyal Levi.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Unstoppable Recording Machine Podcast. I am Eyal Levi. Joey Sturgis and Joel Wanasek are not with us today. Joey is at the APMA Awards representing JST, so he gave a talk today on some sort of mixing thing. We give lots of talks. It's hard to keep up with what's what, but he's over there. And Joel is in Russia on his 2-month, how they say in Europe, holiday. And with me is Mr. Lasse Lammert, self-proclaimed emperor of LSD Studios in Lübeck, Germany. You may know him for his productions with Ailstorm, Glory Hammer, Inner Sanctum, and a bunch of other stuff. You might know him on YouTube for his guitar tone videos. He's a guitar player, is known for getting amazing guitar tones. And, side note, but not exactly a side note, is he also is a student of physics, which I think is interesting. So thanks for being here.
Well, thanks for having me. Thanks for the kind words. I'm glad you like my stuff.
Oh, yeah. I love your stuff. You first sent me your stuff when I was doing a creative live mixing class.
Yeah.
And I was blown away. I mean, I had heard of you, and I guess I knew you through the internet. Kind of like, you know a lot of people through the internet, but I didn't know that you were actually really good and stuff. It kind of blew my mind because, lots of people send you stuff and it's like, cool.
Yeah, often you don't even bother listening, really. Because, you can't. If you get sent so much stuff, really, you can't really listen to everything.
That bums me out sometimes because I get hit up literally a few hundred times a day by people. And I want to listen to stuff, but sometimes it's not even that I can't listen to it. It's that by the time I get online or something, it's already like 50, their message is like 50 deep. I don't even see it. But, I have to reserve the majority of my listening time for the people who are paying for Skype crits or who are part of our mixing communities and stuff like that, because, they're paying money to be a part of that. And, there's only so many hours in a day, but I was in a good mood and we were talking about something, and you sent me stuff, and I was like, holy shit, this is good. So, yeah. Well, so happy to have you here, and want to mainly talk about guitar tone, but I have a few general questions as well. We told our audience that you're coming on, and they submitted some questions, and
cool.
A lot of questions, actually. They were super stoked. So we have a good amount of stuff to talk about. Cool. But, just in a more general sense, I read a quote about your place. It says, with a facility capable of accommodations for up to 10 persons in a huge garden, LSD Studios provides a true retreat for the recording artists where they are able to escape from the pressures of daily life and concentrate simply on making music and getting their very best performances on tape. And yeah, that's obviously your quote, but how important is it for you to have a relaxed environment when working on music?
Well, actually, it wasn't even my quote. It's just...
It's not?
No, it's the guitarist of Halcyon Wave from Atlanta, I think.
Oh, shit. Okay. Hey, so that's a review.
I kind of liked that, and I just used it for my homepage, I think.
Oh, nice. That's a good review.
It's very important, really, because, if the artist is not really feeling comfortable, there's no way you're going to get a good performance. And that's what really matters, the performance. You can reamp as often as you want. You're never going to get a great sound if the artist isn't feeling comfortable. Especially for stuff like vocals, where you really, really hear a difference, but guitars as well. You often see this red light syndrome, I'd call it, where people just play it cleanly and flawlessly, and as soon as you start recording, they just keep fucking up because they're nervous. And everyone knows that. I mean, myself, I've got the same problem to a certain degree at least. But yeah, I think it's really important for them to be relaxed and to be able to focus on the music.
You know, I didn't realize how important setting the environment was. I mean, I always knew it was important, and I always did this, but I didn't realize how crucial it is until my band recorded with Jason Sukoff in 2008. And I had been running a studio for like 6 years at that point. So I already had clients and tried to set up a good environment and work with their psychology. But I guess I was a little nervous about the recording because, you know, label budget and pressure and all that stuff. And he's an incredible guitar player. So, you know, he's intimidating.
When you're working on music, like recording music, well, not 24/7, but like 6 or 7 days a week, it's easy to forget that it's quite a stressful situation for a musician that's coming in to your place, because you're doing it every day. They're doing it like a few weeks every year maybe, or every other year or whatever. So it's definitely going to be more stressful for them. So it's good to just take a step back every now and then and just try to get that outside view.
Well, yeah, I mean, I had worked on the songs for like 5 months, 6 months, and then it was like, okay, after all this work, here it is. It's the moment. It's almost like the same pressure of a live show, but even worse, I think. But the thing is that he's such a great producer that he got me feeling great, and he inspired a level of confidence I didn't know I had, and I ended up performing way above what I thought I was capable of. And that just showed me, first of all, everybody's scared to go in the studio. And number two, a great producer knows how to overcome that and help empower the musician. And I guess experiencing it blew my mind.
I think that is actually the best compliment that someone can give you as a producer. It's not like the snare sounds great or the guitar sounds great. It's when the band leaves and tells you that you got the best possible performance out of them and the best possible version of the song they came into the studio with. That's pretty much the best they can say, I think.
I've definitely, when people have told me that, I've definitely, that's made me feel great. But I definitely think that that's kind of the mark of a great producer. Well, one of the marks. Some of the other ones are clearly, well, how does it sound in the end? Because,
but that should be a gift, really. I mean, if you produce
you're right. But you know what, though? You're right. I think that some of that stuff should be a given. Like your technical skills are a given. And when, I guess at the highest levels, that is assumed. But I think that for some guys starting out, like if they're listening to this podcast where we're talking about setting an environment, they might not realize that if your stuff sounds like shit, it doesn't matter how good the environment is.
Fair enough, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that part's just assumed. And okay, so speaking of the stuff that should be assumed, this is something I'm just curious about. And given your background in physics and music, do you find yourself applying science of sound knowledge to your production work?
Not really. I think it helped a lot when I built the space here in 2007, I think it was, because I could save a lot of money just by doing all the like RT60 and room mode calculations myself and like treating the rooms and all that stuff because of my background in physics, and also used to teach acoustics at McNally Smith College of Music. So I was quite confident doing all the like calculations for the room treatment. That's what definitely helped.
I was about to say, that sounds like a yes.
Yeah, yes. Not when it comes to mixing, though. Because I purely mix by, not even by ear, but by feeling, I'd say.
Yeah.
I kind of I mix by colors even. Like this thing where I want something to sound purple, and that's when I choose a different amp, or I want it to sound more green. Like some people have colors for like days of the week or for numbers, and that sounds for me.
Do you actually like physically see the color?
Yes, yeah.
There's a condition for that.
TDA or something like that, right? Yeah,
something like that. Not very many people have it. So okay, so like if you go to a concert, what and you close your eyes, what are you seeing? Like say you go see Slayer or something.
Slayer would be more red brownish.
Now, is that because of the video for Raining Blood, or because that's what it sounds like?
No, definitely not. No, I think it's more the graininess, the mid-range of the tone. Like typically Marshall tones are like brownish for me, while the 5150, for example, is more blue.
Interesting. So when you're mixing, basically, and you're hearing things, it's more about like how bright or dark those colors are, and then you just apply sound to them.
Exactly. Yes. Like, for example, when I know the band once, I talked to the band before, obviously, what kind of sound they're going for, because you can't really do I want the snare from that album and the guitars of that album. That doesn't work. So you have to have a vision before you even start recording and placing the first microphone. The colors come into play when, like, the drums, for example, should be cracky and biting rather than like lush and big. And then I go for a brighter, as in color bright, guitar tone as well.
So, okay, so here's a question then. What if you pick drums that sound one color and an amp that sounds another? Like, where does...
That's not going to work.
Okay.
Well, that's the case, like when, for example, you got a very lush, thick, dense guitar sound, which would be like a dark blue or purple for me. And then you got a like Pantera-like snare drum. All you're going to hear is the very attack, so it's going to sound very thin. So I got to pick a guitar tone that's kind of like molded around the drum tone to have some space, so you get some of the sustain of the already thinner sounding snare.
You know, that's kind of mind-blowing, because I guess I don't see it that way. So, meaning not that I disagree, but I just don't see the colors, so it's kind of incredible. Were you always like this?
Yes. My head was always a bit weird, I think.
Well, I mean, I feel like it's the same type of thing as perfect pitch. Like, either you're born with this ability or you're not, and it is what it is, right?
I guess, yes. And it can also be a curse, like perfect pitch as well. Perfect pitch can be terrible, like when you're recording.
Yeah,
I'm doing a lot of like folk metal stuff, for example, where I have like real strings, at least real violins and stuff like that, that have to fit with fretted instruments. And so obviously it's always going to be a bit difficult, because the proper good violinist is trying to intonate the proper way, and then it's going to clash with the fretted instruments. And I've got one particular violinist who's got perfect pitch, and it's terrible for her to play with guitars, because it always sounds off and wrong and off pitch.
Yeah, my dad's got perfect pitch, and I feel like that's prevented him from being able to like any sort of modern music, or very little modern music, because if things are just slightly off, that's what he hears. Yeah. And he can't handle it. So even great stuff that maybe were recorded in the era before autotune, like, I don't know, Beatles vocals harmonies or something, you know, it's just stuff that's classic but just slightly off. That kind of stuff drives him insane. And forget live performances from any modern artists. Like, he just can't take that sort of thing. So luckily you don't have perfect pitch as well, right?
No. I actually have to fight sometimes to hear the pitch properly on bass guitar, for example. I usually, when I record bass guitar, I just taught the mid-range real heavy, so I hear it clashing with the guitars more easily. Stuff like that, little tricks.
Interesting. So your EQ, does bright and dark on the EQ spectrum correspond to bright and dark on the color spectrum?
No, not really. I think it's more corresponding to graininess, probably, and how smooth the sound is. So when it's grainier, it's a bit brighter, and if it's like really smooth and lush sounding, it's probably darker.
Interesting. So, like, say you hear a Kurt Ballou production. Are you familiar with his work?
Yeah.
Okay, like, have you heard the latest Nails record, which is musically...
I've heard a song, yeah.
It sounds like, it sounds like an explosion of, everything.
He's I really like his work. It's very unique, I think, because he's got a nail to like walk this line between too dirty and messy, and fucking awesome and in your face. And he's always just on the fucking awesome in your face side of that line.
Yep.
It's perfect balance, really. I couldn't do that. I've tried it a couple of times, and it's difficult for me to just let it go then, because I always feel like, oh, that's too messy. But his stuff isn't messy. It's just energetic, really.
And that's his aesthetic. But the thing is, like, how would that show up in your head? I'm curious, because musically, like, if I was to describe it musically, like, the words would be grainy, right? But from what you're saying, that wouldn't fit with your grainy image.
No, not really, no. Grainy to me is more like, raspy, sandy, and it doesn't really sound like raspy to me. It's too, the attack of the guitars, for example, is too, I don't want to say blurred, but it's not like the tightest, quick attack when you play palm mutes, for example. So it's a bit more smeared, and that smeared sound kind of makes it sound darker for me.
You know, this just fascinates me on a purely just human curiosity level, because there's certain things like, you know, hearing about people's dreams is usually a very boring thing, even though people love talking about their dreams. But the thing that blows my mind about it is realizing that you'll never know what somebody means when they're describing that, because it's totally 100% in their head. And I feel like I try to imagine what you say you're imagining, but I'm sure there's absolutely no way I can possibly understand it.
No, I don't think there's a way I could really describe, like, make you feel it. It's just probably not going to happen.
No, it's not.
I wouldn't even know how to word it, really.
No, I just think it's interesting to me. Like, I also think about this with animals as well. Like, how does my dog compute the things I tell it? Is it in language? Is it feeling it? Like, I don't know. These things blow my mind, and then I try to think about other things.
Those thoughts can drive you crazy, though. Even if you just go down to, like, what color is a strawberry? Well, it's red. And then you think about, like, does the other person see red the same way you do see red? Or is it more like you're green, maybe? And there's no way to tell, really, because you can't really look inside his head, can you?
Yeah, make your head explode. When you actually realize, I realized at a really young age that you're actually literally completely disconnected from the rest of the world. And I think I was just the idea. I think I was 13 or 14 when I realized that since everything is processed in your head, nothing actually exists for you outside of your head. That concept just blew my mind.
Exactly, it's so heavily filtered that it's not really much to do with like what's really going on anymore.
Yeah, and speaking of that, like, back to music, I think it's actually really phenomenal if you can figure out how to interpret what somebody else means. Like, for instance, when they're talking about what they want musically, what their goals are, the ability to understand what they mean, I think is also really quite fascinating.
Definitely, yeah, and also a good thing for a producer to have, really.
Yeah, I mean, is that something that you feel like you had to develop, or is it just another thing you just understood what people meant?
I've never really thought about that, to be honest. I think I kind of, when I started producing, I probably just kind of knew and understood, but I have no idea how that started, because I was on, like, internet forums a lot, and so you have to describe stuff using words, and so there are some words that just keep coming up, like lush and biting and like thick, dense and dark and all that stuff. So I guess it's like some of it becomes common vocabulary, and some is just, well, learning the musician or learning to know the artist or whatever.
Yeah, I feel like we actually have a podcast episode called Musical Translator. It's our second episode, and it's all about that as a producer, that's your main job, really, is learning how to translate people's ambitions and words into music. That sounds great. So let's switch gears and talk about a guitar. I was noticing in one of the photos of your studio, you've got some killer gear: Kemper, Axe-Fx, a Diesel, Bogner, Uberschall, Driftwood, etc.
Yeah, I'm a nerd, really.
Dude, you've got an arsenal. Like, what are your go-tos? Like, and like, as even out of that whole, wide variety, do you find yourself going back to the same things or different every time?
I try to not repeat myself when it comes to sounds and tones. So I'm not using templates a lot, definitely not like mix, like EQ templates or anything. And I try to not gravitate towards the same guitar chain all the time. But there's some stuff that just obviously just works. For example, the 5150, which is like for a reason, especially when you got some amps are very sensitive to the right hand or the picking hand of the guitarist, like the rectifier, which can sound amazing and just perfect, but you have to hit really hard and you have to have the right wrist for it, really. And the 5150 is a bit more forgiving. It kind of sounds great with like every player. So that's one that definitely is being used quite often in the studio. My Soldano on the Super Lead Overdrive is by far the most often used amp for leads and solos here, because I just love how creamy it sounds. See, there's another word, creamy.
I've got an Avenger. Creamy to means no 6K.
Kinda, yeah. Yes, I guess. Yeah, creamy to me means getting rid of that sandy, raspy graininess, I guess, which is somewhere in the 6K area, yeah.
Or rolling off the tone knob, but still, I feel like whenever, like, buttery or creamy, whenever someone's like, I want my leads more buttery, I cut 6K, and they're like, oh, that's what I meant.
Yeah, I think it works quite well. Or just, it's like it's switching from the bridge pickup to the neck pickup or something like that.
Yeah, for sure. I've got an Avenger. I love that amp.
It's fantastic. It's essentially the hot rod with a factory installed depth mod, I think. I used to have a few hot rods as well, the hot rod 50 and the hot rod 100 plus, which is like the 2-channel version, essentially an SLO. And the hot rod 50, just the 1-channel amp, is, I think, the best Soldano I had for ribbons. So that's essentially the Avenger.
My only gripe with it, and it's a great amp, I love it, but no effects loop. And that bummed me out, because that, for touring reasons, back when I would tour with amps, like that invalidated me being able to take it with me, because I needed effects.
You don't really want the Soldano effects loop anyways, to be honest.
No?
Nah. It's line level, so you can't use a lot of pedals, and it's before the EQ section of the amp. So it's entirely weird, really, and it doesn't work for a lot of stuff. It's still a relic from when everyone was using huge racks with tons of 19-inch gear in it. And yeah.
Okay.
It's also sucking a lot of tone. I actually installed you can get it as a factory mod, like a loop bypass switch. If you guys want to check out my YouTube channel, it's just search for Lammert Soldano loop bypass. You're going to find it. There's a little comparison video with the loop in and the loop out. And it's much more in your face with a loop bypassed. So I'm using it like that all the time, really.
You know, that's interesting. One of my... I don't know. Let me restart that sentence. One of the people that I respect the most in the world of audio is a guy named Josh Florian, and he's got a company called JCF Audio, and he's a genius. The units are super expensive. I mean, expensive as fuck. And he builds converters and summing boxes, and will build gigantic custom boards for people, and he's got no interest in mass market. It's all like, you know, it's kind of like if Ferraris were handmade to order kind of thing, like some are. And he always told me that the reason that he doesn't even put power buttons on his stuff, like no lights, no power buttons, and usually his stuff only does one thing, like if he's got A to D, it doesn't do D to A, for instance, is because the best gear, he says, the utmost quality is when there's nothing extra in there. Everything you add that takes electricity will sacrifice something. And so I think about that with the effects loop. It's like, well, maybe they just wanted the Avenger to kick ass.
Yeah.
Maybe they realized that their effects loop sucked the tone out, and they just wanted an amp that sounded incredible.
I definitely agree. You don't need all that stuff, really. I mean, like, I'm not a fan of 3-channel amps. Like, I do like 3-channel amps, but I'm just using like 1 channel usually. Because, well, I got the luxury, I got the amp, so I can choose a clean channel from another amp and the crunch channel from yet another amp. So obviously when you're a touring artist and you're not using the Kemp or the Axe, you do need a flexible, versatile amp. But in the studio, it feels weird to me to use the clean channel from the same amp as the distortion channel, even if it's both great. It just something feels weird about that to me.
Oh, so it's not that you think that 3-channel amps suck. It's just that you want a completely new sound.
Yeah, it just feels like a compromise, even if it isn't. And that's the sort of thing that just it's going to bug me later.
You know, I agree with you. And this is, as a rule, I've always tracked leads and cleans with different amps than the rhythms. Always. I would never do the same thing. And it was the same amp because I've always come from the idea that the more different you can make things, the easier it's going to be to mix.
Exactly, yeah.
So different guitars, different head, different cabinets, everything.
Yep. Especially cabinets. I think cabinets are much more important than amps, really. Cabinets essentially like give you the EQ curve, while amps are just more, well, the dynamics change, and different amps obviously sound different, but I think the difference in cabs is much bigger than in amps. That's what people often underestimate.
Well, I think that this is why you can get excellent tones from using a really good amp sim with a cabinet. Yeah. You can get really, really good tones, or using a real head, but with an amazingly recorded IR, you can also get really incredible tones. It's tougher though, but it can be done. But I feel like that makes all the difference in the world. Is if you're flipping, and not to take this to IRs instead of cabs, but like just for our listeners who never have mic'd a cab, if you notice when you're cycling through IRs, no matter what you're using, if it's a 5150 through a hot plate or pod farm or whatever, when you're cycling through IRs, you don't even need to change the settings on the amp, and the IR itself can either make the tone lock into place and sound incredible, or totally destroy it.
Yep.
And the same with the miking of the cab.
Exactly. It's not even the speaker. It's not even that the T75 sounds so different from the V30. Obviously it does, but often in forums you read, just get a vintage 30 equipped cabinet. It doesn't even matter if it's like a 112 or 4x12, because you're just close miking anyways. And
of course it matters.
Yeah, it's a huge difference. Even if the dimensions are similar, it's still a huge difference. Sorry for plugging my YouTube channel again, but I did a comparison for that exact thing. Just I compared like 35 or whatever, all my amps through the same cab, and then in another series I just used the same amp and just used different cabs with the same miking though, exact same position, and pretty much all of them are vintage 30 412s. Well, you guys can just give that a listen and then check it out, and it's amazing how different the cabs sound from one another. It's just the palette of tone, the variety you get is just mind-blowing. So I I kind of understand it, but like when people are collecting amps and they don't care about their cab, collecting amps is just sexier than collecting like a box of wood. But
it's true.
If you're into tone and if you're into getting great tones, just don't underestimate the effect and the influence of the cabinet.
You know, Andy Sneap, bring him up because I feel like that's how me and you started talking, was our shared admiration for him. But what he told me like 10 years ago or something was that the trick was that the cab has to be run loud enough to where it starts becoming a resonator, basically. Like the wood starts shaking and becomes a part of the sound, and that's why the cabinet itself, how it's constructed and what type of wood and how much space there is in there, makes all the difference in the world, as long as you're running it hot enough to where it actually engages the entire shell of the cabinet.
Yes, and that's why I think power breaks and all that stuff doesn't really work the way you think it should, or the way you want it to work, because what you're hearing or what you're looking for isn't as much the saturation and the overdriving the power amp of the amplifier. It's more the driving the speakers into saturation and getting the thump and the influence of the cabinet. So just by lowering the wattage and just decreasing the volume, you might still get the saturation from the power amp by using a hot plate or whatever it's called, the power break, but you're not going to get the influence of the cab as much.
No, I agree. I don't think that people should use those. There was a method that Andrew Wade was showing about how to make IRs with it, and that's one thing. But I think if you're actually trying to record a cabinet, playing a guitar through a cabinet, hot plate is not the way to go.
Exactly, agreed.
Or an ISO cab.
I've never really had any good experiences using an ISO cab. They always sound like congested and small to me.
Keith Merrow, he was showing me an ISO cab that he got to sound pretty damn good, but he modified the shit out of it.
I've heard good things about the Randall one, which is essentially like a 412 size.
Well, that's the one he has.
Cool.
He took out everything on the inside. Like, he had all this padding, I believe. He took it all out and he modified it. I mean, still, I would prefer, and I know that he prefers not using that, but I think he had to use it before he moved to his house. And so he got it as good as he possibly could. And it sounds better than any ISO cab I've ever heard besides that. But also, that's another thing is that, I don't know. I don't know. Tell me if you agree with me. Whenever people tell me that they're trying to get really good at guitar tone, but they can only work in an apartment, and so they hate amp sims, so they have like an ISO cab or a hot plate and can only turn it down really quiet. My advice to them is, well, get over it and get good with amp sims, because you're not going to get a good tone out of a cabinet that way. Like, that's just not the way to do it. So get good with an amp sim, and then once you have the ability to actually run the stuff loud, then start working with cabs.
That's what I would have said a few years back. Now I would just recommend they get the like a Torpedo or something. Those 2 Notes products.
Oh yeah,
they're fucking amazing. I'm using them all the time now. I'm not using the stock cabinets, like the factory stuff. It's not bad at all. It's definitely usable. It's great, really. It's just I hate using other people's tones, so I'm just creating my own IRs, using them every now and then. Definitely for like when I'm tracking guitars, I'm often not miking a cab, but I'm using a real amp, because to some guitarists it feels differently, the way it bounces and interacts, and then run that into the Torpedo. Sometimes I don't even reamp later, sometimes I reamp, but the Torpedo is it's amazing. I'm using my own IRs, but they're definitely like great factory installed impulses that you can use.
I completely agree with you about the Torpedo. I guess if they can afford it,
it's a pricey.
Then get it.
Yes.
It is a pricey unit, but yeah, that's a great way to go for sure. I guess more what I mean is don't go those other methods.
No, that's compromising.
Yeah. Using a Torpedo is not a compromise. That's a great unit.
There are also great like software solutions, like the Kazrock stuff, for example, is amazing. The Thermionic, or what is it called?
Thermionic.
Yeah, they've got great stuff. Well, the JST amp I've heard is good. So there's good stuff out there. It's not like the old Cubase 4 amp simulation anymore. Plus, it's mainly in the IRs anyways. And what, like a few years back, and when you used like Pod or plugins, the cab models he used were essentially just like a frequency corrected. This is like a EQ curve put on the amp simulation. And that always sounded shitty. And the stock cabs in the XFX1 or the Pod still sound shitty. But if you're using an IR, it's a whole different game. It's amazing how close you get.
I completely agree. I feel like that's like the secret to getting the most out of amp sims is the IR. And speaking of your YouTube channel, what inspired you to do that? You do a ton of compare and contrast videos for mics, guitar amps. Like, what got you into showcasing that stuff?
Purely because I'm a nerd and I like comparing stuff. I'm really not doing it for the way it started out. I didn't do it for anyone else. I just whenever I did it like a shootout, I always wanted to have it in a blind test scenario, so I could actually for myself pick what I liked and what I didn't like, and then be able to go back to that later, like a few weeks later or months or whatever. And I figured some other people might be interested in that too, and I just started uploading that to forums first. And at some point I needed to archive the stuff, and I just kept deleting it off my hard drive. So I just uploaded it to YouTube, and apparently people seem to like it. So I'm still doing that, and I'm still not really doing it as much for for the other people, I'm just doing it for myself still because I want to compare stuff. And since I'm doing it anyway, I might just upload it for other people to hear.
I mean, fair enough.
That's also why I'm not putting that much effort into the whole video production. I would like my videos to be as awesome looking as Ola's, for example, or Keith Merrow's. It's just I can't be arsed at this point because it's just a lot of work.
I mean, that's their thing, though. That's their thing. Like Keith went to school for video.
Yeah, I know Ola didn't. He just taught himself to do it, and I could do it. It's not like I'm probably not too stupid to learn it. It's just
I'm sure you're not.
Since I'm really just doing it for myself, I don't see the point in really putting that much effort in it.
I'm sure you're not too stupid to learn it, Pete. I will agree with you on that. No, but I understand. I mean, that's their career, so it's like if their videos have to look incredible, or else they're in trouble, in my opinion. But still, I still think that for what you're doing, the videos are fine. They get the point across, and people like them. So
it's probably a smaller audience because you really get all the nerds and all the freaks who just want to hear something. It might be a bit more boring to people that aren't that deep into all the details of recording or amps or whatever, microphones.
Well, so speaking of freaks, I've got a bunch of questions here from the audience who have watched your videos. So let me ask you some questions then from them. So Rodney, sorry, dude, I'm not going to even try your last name. Rodney is asking, and hey, by the way, if you feel like these questions are hard to answer in that they're too general or something like that, just say it.
Yeah,
like,
cool.
don't feel like you have to give a dumb answer to a dumb question or something. And sometimes guys don't know that they're asking something that's way too general.
Yeah, but often those supposedly dumb questions are being asked by a lot of people. So it's maybe even good to just address that and tell them why it's hard to answer.
You know what? Let me rephrase, guys. I don't actually mean dumb questions. I
did like little air quotes here. Just you probably couldn't see it.
That's awesome. Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna quote unquote dumb question. What I actually mean is just questions that are way like for instance, if it was like, how do you mix a song, or how do you mix vocals? It's like, well. Cool. So Rodney's asking where should the guitar sit EQ wise?
Obvious answer would be in the mid range, I guess. But mid range is like a very wide term. You go from almost all the musical range is mid range. Yeah, it really depends on the mix and depends on the style of music as well. If you have a lot of like brass instruments and folk instruments and stuff like that. You obviously need to create some space, and the guitars have to be more in the background and a bit more on the lower register, because you don't want to, like brass, for example, which is a lot in the very present in the high mids. You can't have guitars fight brass and cymbals and vocals all in the same range. So I try to create some space there and just put them a little bit lower, maybe. Same if you got like a lot of instruments that are in the low mid range, some. Like folky and for like folky percussion instruments or droney stuff, you need to create some space there. Especially the range at 250 hertz and 400 is always difficult for me because that's where everything gets muddy. But if you suck out too much there, you're gonna get an anemic, thin sounding mix. So you have to be very careful with that when you start recording. So yeah, no easy answer. Just you have to listen to the other instruments, to the style of music, to the mix, and just find a space for them.
I think it's important to note that guitar, especially distorted guitar, will swallow everything. It is broadband as fuck. And if you're not careful, it will swallow every other instrument in the mix.
What definitely helps is to tie it back to the using different cabs. Like when you use the same cab for all the rhythm guitars, which I often do, but the danger is that those little tiny fizzy spikes, they just add up and can create a whole lot of fizzy mess in the mix. And if you just use a different guitar cab, for example, for like the other side or for the second pair of guitars, you don't get this build-up on fizzy frequencies because those little spikes are going to be somewhere else, not the same spot. So that, of course, already helps to create some space for cymbals and stuff.
But then there's a trade-off also, though, I think, when you start to layer multiple rhythm sounds. it's harder to get the big, consistent,
Yes, yeah. You don't get this big, lush wall of sound as easily, but you get more width in your mix. Mm-hmm. And also depends on if you're doing it left-right differently, or like the main stereo pair, which I usually pan 100%, and then a different amp or cab or whatever for the second pair, which is panned slightly in.
So you don't go 100% with all four?
No.
And you actually do four guitars?
Yeah, depends on the style. If I get the time, and if it's like more modern metal, core-ish stuff or stuff like that, I do like to use four guitars, yeah. For thrash metal and stuff that has a lot of other instruments going on, some folk metal stuff, I just do two guitars.
Makes sense. So same guy, Rodney, is asking, do you have a go-to microphone position?
I'm starting with the old sneap position, really. Like when I'm using an SM57, it's usually in front of a V30, and I'm just starting at the seam where the dust cap meets the cone, because that's a good starting point.
I will echo that. That's also where I start. Sometimes that's all you need to do.
Yeah, really, yeah. And that's actually, I'm being asked so often, how do you get guitar tones? How do you do this? And then usually they just tell me I've got a 57 and a 421 and a Royer or whatever. And, well, maybe that's going to be a question later, but I'm going to answer that now. My answer really is, well, if you can't get a proper guitar tone with a 57, don't even bother adding another mic, because that's all you should need. And then you might add something to kind of EQ it by phase canceling stuff, or just to add another flavor. But if it's not there, if it's not great with just a 57 in front of a V30, well, work on that first.
Yeah, there's been plenty of times where that initial setup has been great and there's been no need to do anything else, and there's been times where it hasn't been enough. It goes both ways. But point being that's even when it doesn't work, it's generally not going to be terrible.
Yeah.
And if you can't get that to work within, I feel like 15 minutes, at least sound decent, you've got something else that's the problem.
Yep. And sometimes I almost feel like a fraud. I feel bad when people ask me, how do you get guitar tones? And I just say, well, I don't really know. There's no magic wizardry to it. I just throw a 57 in front of a V30, and that's it pretty much, often. Not always, but a lot of the times, that's just it.
Enough of the times. Yeah. Well, that's the thing is, when we talk about toners in the hands and all that other shit that people are sick of hearing, but that's the truth.
Yeah.
It's all these other things that are, I guess, not as sexy as like cool mic positions and stuff, make such a difference that if you don't have that stuff right, no matter how you mic the cabinet, it's going to sound like shit.
Exactly.
Now, I know guys who will tweak guitar tone for days, but just about everyone I know gets a good initial tone very quickly.
I generally don't really use EQ at all on guitars. I do a 60 hertz high pass and a 12K-ish low pass, and every now and then I just cut ever so slightly at around 3 or 3.3K, but just like a very narrow, maybe 1.2 dB cut, and that's it.
It's because you get the tone right on the way in.
Yeah, and often it sounds a bit fizzy that way, and I feel like if I solo it, I want to cut a bit more in the high mid-range, but in the mix it then just works, and I don't bother doing it.
Yeah, I think that's another important note, is especially if you're getting into the habit of cutting frequencies, which we show people how to do that a lot on guitars. Painful stuff like in 4 or 3.2, like whatever. The thing is, if you do that in solo too much, you're going to hear way more frequencies you need to cut than you actually need to cut.
Exactly. And you end up just turning the guitars too loud in the mix then, so that you can still hear them, and then everything is just muddy.
Yeah, the guitars sound like a neutered mush. So, those spiky frequencies, those harsh frequencies are your friend. You just have to keep them under control.
Exactly. Listen to Andy Sneap's stuff, for example. He used to post some cab comparisons or tube screamer comparisons on his forum like 10 years back or 8 years back. If you can't find those, just give them a listen, because the guitar sound, if you just listen to them soloed, people, if you didn't know it's Andy Sneap, a lot of people would say, well, that's fizzy and thin and scratchy and sounds like shit. But, well, I think you can't really argue with his results. And if you listen to his mixes, it just fucking works. And it just, sorry for swearing, and it's just amazing.
No, you can swear. You can fucking swear on this goddamn podcast, bro. So, yeah, that was honestly part of, I don't know if you're familiar with Nail the Mix. It's the mixing service that we do. Reason we do that is because when I was starting to get decent at this, I was lucky enough that I kind of met Andy. I bothered him all the time.
Yeah, same here.
And back in like 2005, and luckily enough, when my band got signed, he reamped the record, our first record for us. Colin
was the
mixed
Hinderers?
The Hinderers, yeah.
The Hinderers.
Yeah, Colin mixed it, but we had this situation where we were in London and we needed guitar tone, and it was a Sunday, and everything's closed because that's how things are, and we couldn't get an amp, nothing. And so we just asked Andy if he would do it, and he did it. He was just for free as well, I might add. So those of you guys who don't like doing shit for free, just keep in mind that everybody still does stuff for free and favors, and that's the way of the world. But yeah, so he did all our guitars on the album, didn't charge us anything, sent it back, and it's just amazing hearing what an actual tone from an actual guy sounds like. There's stuff in there that an amateur will cut out. You have to know exactly what to cut out and how much of it to cut out, and not let yourself go too far.
And that's true when it comes to a lot of stuff. For example, editing as well. I've asked him about quantizing and editing bass, and he said, well, I don't even bother. I'd like some movement in there. But he's got the ear to judge and decide if it's annoying or not. So you really need to know what's going to happen if you don't edit. Is it tight enough or is it not tight enough? It's just going to be a mess in the end later in the low frequencies. And if you got Andy's ears and experience, you can decide to not edit and let it just slide and have it a bit sloppy even if you want.
And he was also mentored by Colin Richardson.
Exactly, yeah.
So it goes, and this is something I'm sure a lot of guys are going to be like, well, how did Andy get his ears? Or I don't have Colin Richardson to show me how to do it, or whatever. It's like, well, yeah, but you live in an age where you have us, and you have the internet, and you have Nail the Mix, you have Creative Live, you have all these things that we didn't have back in the day. So we had to, if someone got lucky, they could have a great mentor like Colin.
Plus, Sneap, he's still approaching stuff quite differently from Colin.
Oh, yeah.
Like Colin is doing a lot of EQing and processing on guitars, and his guitars sound amazing, but Sneap's, doing it quite differently. And the way he started out was actually just putting a 57 on, I don't even know what it was. He didn't have a stand, so he just used a combo amp or a chair or something, and just put the SM57 on there, just moved it in front of the speaker. So he's a good combination of self-taught and being educated or helped out by Colin Richardson.
I think that everybody who's good is kind of a little bit of both. Like, you have to have the drive to figure it out for yourself, but typically there's someone who's further along who kind of like, at the very least, shows you what the standard is, or
definitely helps out.
What's actually expected of you in the big leagues. Some stuff like that. So, all right, another question from the same guy, Rodney. We love you. Do you have a go-to microphone?
57.
Yep.
It's just same reason. It just works. I do like to experiment and use different stuff, especially when. Well, Andy's a mate of mine, and we talk every now and then about mics and guitar tones. Whenever he recommends something, I usually, take his word for it and get the mic and try it myself. And most of the time, I'm happy with that. For example, the AT250 DE, it's like a dual element microphone. It's got a condenser element and a dynamic element in it. That works quite well. The PR30, it's another dynamic microphone. Doesn't work that well for me. I like it on floor toms, but not that much on guitars. And the usual stuff, the 421 I use every now and then. The M201, which is a biodynamic mic, is like one of my favorites, preferred to the 421 even. The biodynamic M160, it's a ribbon mic. I like that a lot, even prefer it over my Roya Labs R121 because it's tighter. The Roya has got more like proximity effect going on. The M160 is a bit tighter. But all those mics I usually don't use just by themselves. Usually it's the 57 in there and then one of the other mics blended in, except for the AT250DE, which is like a dual element mic already. So I'm just using that by itself.
All right. So question from Matisse. And again, I'm sorry, bro, I'm not going to try your name. So when you work with so many different amps, with so many different characters, how do you come up with the tones you're going to use? Do you start already in the mix and adjust until it sits, or do you start from scratch?
It's different every time. Usually I start with, like when we're tracking guitars and I plan to reamp later, for whatever reason, I try to start with a guitar tone that the guitarist feels comfortable with. That's especially when it comes to amount of gain, distortion. And I already have a rough idea where we're going, obviously, because, you have to have an idea where you want to go when you start recording. So I'm kind of pushing them into that direction already. So if I'm using the Kemper, for example, I'm probably going to be using a Kemper profile with like a Mesa cab and a 57 or something something I could imagine would work later in the mix. So I've got a good starting point there. Then sometimes just for fun, sometimes because it's necessary when I reamp. Usually the band isn't around anymore, but when they're around, I go a bit further with that when I reamp, just to have a huge blind test. Just to stack up like 5 or 6 amps and 3 or 4 cabinets and just reamp a short section, double tracked, and just go through them and just eliminate one after the other until we come up with a final tone. Yeah, and if the band's in, that's going to be a few more amps because it's fun for everyone involved. If I'm doing it myself, I usually have a good idea already, and I'm just trying 2 or 3 amps, and I end up pretty quickly with the tone I want to go with.
Yeah. So just to harp on the first thing you said about knowing where you're going, we just released a blog, urm.academy/blog, and one written by Joey Sturgis is called 5 Reasons You Suck as a Producer, and one of them is you don't have a vision. And it's because all great producers have a vision of how great and what direction the album or the song or whatever the EP are going to go in. You can't do anything without that. If you don't have that, you know, it's up to randomness where you end up.
I agree. That's the most important thing, because you're going to end up with, it's going to be sheer luck if you end up with a decent sounding mix, because you're going to have, let's say, 4 or 5 elements, guitars, bass, and drums and vocals, that are going to be fighting each other because they just don't fit together. Even if the Pantera drums sound great and the In Flames guitars sound great, if you have In Flames guitars with Pantera drums, it's just not going to work. So you have to have a vision. That blog, by the way, it's just kind of hit home, and I agree with everything he says.
Dude, you don't suck as a producer.
No, but there's you always have to sit back at some point and just take that outside perspective again. And a lot of those points I often see sneaking in with myself. So
we're all guilty. We're all guilty of that stuff.
Yeah. So you have to consciously make an effort to fight that sometimes.
Well, I think that being great at something isn't an accident. Like, it's you have to have, as much as you have to have a vision for a great record, you need to have a vision for greatness, your own greatness, and a lot of that requires contemplation. And those things in that blog, we actually brainstormed it a little, and those are things that no matter how good you are, if you're not careful, you're going to fall into those habits. It's totally normal. Speaking of vision, it's totally normal for people to fall into a routine, for instance, and to do things out of habit rather than making a conscious decision of charting the course. Made X amount of records. It's really, really quick to mic things up this way, boom, 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 get it done, rather than really figuring out what the vision is for the end result and changing directions until you get there. It's a lot easier to do, to go down road number one. And I know plenty of guys who are great who fall into those habits. So I can see how someone who is awesome would have that blog hit home, because we're all human.
Especially that bit about not appreciating the client or the work. it's easy. Like when you're slaving away editing drums like 5 days in a row, it's easy to just start fucking hating it and then complaining and be like, shitty drummer, can't even fucking control his feet. But yeah, that's just because, well, if you do this right, or if you're good at it, you're also a creative person. So you're probably not going to be the most organized, rational-minded kind of guy. So you're always going to have like some sort of emotional involvement in it. And well, at least for me, I get into like complaining quite too easily sometimes. That doesn't mean I don't appreciate the job or the client. It's just it's just what I do. I complain.
I honestly, man, I think that everybody does. It's a natural thing to do. So it's one of those things that it's important to just check yourself and stop doing it. I think it's totally normal. So here's a question from John. Do you use different string gauges for heavy guitar tones, leads, clean guitars? And if so, what gauges are your go-to?
Well, personally, I just go with whatever feels comfortable for me. And I've got a rather controlled fretting hand, so I can go with light gauges. For like standard tuning, I'm using 9th, half step down, 10th. And for C tuning, which is my main tuning, I'm using the D'Addario EXL 117, I think they're called. It's like the drop tuning ones. It's 11 through, is it 59 or 56? Something like that. But yeah, and then it depends again on the scale of the guitar. If it's like a Fender scale, I'll be using that. And if it's like a Gibson scale, 24.75 or whatever that is, I'm going to be using a heavier gauge. And for guitarists I'm recording, like if it's not myself, same thing. It's usually I just ask them to use whatever strings they're comfortable with. I then hope that it's D'Addario, because in my opinion, they just last longer and sound better than... Like whenever a string broke for me, it was an animal. I don't want to talk bad about the company. A lot of people like that. It's just personally for me...
D'Addario are the best.
Yeah, agreed. And same, for example, for the... when it comes to how long they last, people just recommend or use like those coated strings. I don't even want to mention a brand name. I really hate them because they might work live, but in the studio they just don't cut it for me, because the high strings corrode anyways, and the low strings, the coating just, especially if you're a fast, like thrashy player, you just rub it off and you've got this fuzzy stuff around your strings later that just fucks with the intonation.
I agree. I hate those. I don't allow those. I order the strings for the people.
That's what I prefer to do, but I talk to the bands first and just ask what kind of string gauge they like to use. And obviously if it's like a 9 through 42 on a Les Paul and they tune it down like 3 steps, I'm going to say, well, it's probably not going to cut it. Yeah, but when it comes to tone, it's obviously important. It does play a role, but it's more important when it comes to intonation. So you really have to look at the guitarist, how's his fretting hand, and often if it's not a great guitarist, they have the fretting hand and the picking hand. They can't adjust the strength individually. They don't have it like disconnected. So when you ask them to fret lighter, they're also gonna like hit lighter at the same time.
Yeah, I think that the whole thicker strings, thicker tone is a little misleading, because if you use thicker strings and they can't play hard enough to activate those strings, you actually get weaker tone.
Yep, and that's the point of diminishing returns, really. When also for intonation, when you got like a shorter scale guitar, like a Gibson scale, and you use very thick strings, obviously the string is a bit stiff where it touches the bridge and the nut, so it's not going to be oscillating right away at the fulcrum at the point of contact there. So you're going to have a bit of a stiff string, and the thicker the string is, the stiffer it is, and the more intonation problems you might get. So you may have a more stable tuning when it comes to like a strong or too strong fretting hand, but you also might run into intonation problems. So it's a bit of a trade-off there. And that becomes especially noticeable with bass, I think. Like the difference in tone between thinner strings, medium thick strings, and really thick strings is just insane.
Bass strings make such a difference with tone. It's unbelievable. I know what I like with guitar, but I'm more likely to, if they say I want this brand of non-coated strings instead of this one, I'm much more likely to go with them on it than if they choose a different brand of bass strings than what I want.
Yep. And I try to coax them into getting steel strings nowadays.
Yep.
There's another comparison video on my YouTube channel again, sorry, comparing the regular ones to steel strings. And both same bass, guitar, and new strings. And with the steel strings, you just get so much more depth. And the low end is just punchy and in your face, and the high end is growly and biting. Whereas with like a nickel wound string, you get more muffled, like the low end is a bit round and like rubbery in a way compared to the steel strings.
Yeah, I like Pro Steels.
Oh, they're fantastic. The Adare Pro Steels are my go-to strings on bass guitars.
Oh, absolutely. There's nothing better for this genre, in my opinion.
Agreed.
Like, I'll fight people about that, because seriously, that's the one area with strings where I'm not going to back down, because I've also tested this stuff out. Like, I didn't make a comparison video, but did a bunch of comparison recordings, and the difference is, it's just troubling at times.
Yeah, also with new and old strings. There was a discussion going on, I think it was on Joey's forum the other day, about how old should strings be. And then most people are actually saying that they like the strings to be a few hours old.
Oh, God.
I disagree. It's just, if someone says new string, that means, well, you just put it on, right? If you put it on last night, it's not new anymore, because you played on it and it's going to be corroding overnight. And
new means you just put it on like within the last 10 minutes.
Exactly. And I usually don't let them play between takes. I've got another bass or guitar that is set up with the same strings, so they can practice stuff. They have to practice a lot. And then I change bass strings after, like, it depends on the guitar player and his how his sweat is, but after like 4 hours maybe, I'm going to be changing the bass strings.
Oh, dude, I'm even crazier than that. Usually, if it's Pro Steels, what I'll do is I'll get twice as many low strings as everything else, and I'll usually change out the low string after an hour. And then the whole set.
That makes sense. I should be doing that.
Yeah, I always do that. I do that with guitar, too. I always, we decide how many songs we're doing, and so I order 1.5 times the number of songs of full packs, and then I order 2 times the number of low strings.
I like that idea. I have no idea why I didn't think of that myself, just replacing the low string, because that's where I notice it first. And usually I notice it way before the band does. Well, obviously it's my job to listen for stuff like that. They shouldn't be focusing on that. But at some point you just notice that it's going to get duller and darker and muffled sounding. And when I mention it, they're like, no, it sounds fine. It sounds like before. So then I just record a little bit of that and just put a new string on and then record the same bit. And then they have it like an A/B test, and they can tell themselves pretty easily, because it's insane the difference the bass strings make. And that's one of my main problems with outside recordings. When I get stuff sent and the bass is, they complain that the bass is too soft in the mix later. My reply is usually, I couldn't really get a great bass sound out of it because your strings were like ancient.
Yeah, it's crazy how much of a difference it makes. So it's expensive too. So having an endorsement helps.
Yeah, but if you're spending a couple of €1,000 on a production, like even if you've got someone who's fairly cheap, you're spending quite some money on a production.
Yes.
What's bass strings then? It's another, like, what does a pack cost? Like $20, something like that, 25? I don't know. So it's another $100 or euros or wherever you're from then. Same for drum skins. At least have enough replacement skins for the top of the drums, especially for the snare. And it's another $80, $100 or whatever, but you're spending thousands of dollars for a recording and just expect good results. And usually what helps is when I've got I don't charge by the hour or on a daily rate, but whenever the drummer says he doesn't have money for new skins, I just tell them I'm going to charge by the hour. For the time I'll be EQing your shitty drum tones to have enough attack. So then that usually ends up being more expensive than just getting a set of new skins.
Wow, that's great. that's awesome. I've never considered that. So here's another question from John. When dialing in an amp tone on any head, do you reset the knobs, or do you have a certain starting point no matter what and just adjust from there?
No, I'd never reset the knobs. Because the amp, in my opinion, the settings don't even make a huge difference. Not as much as the cabinet or the miking, for example. And I know my amps inside out. I know the cabs inside out. I know exactly where I like the microphones, and I know the room inside out. Another overlooked factor is the room, even with close miking. And I maybe I did that in the beginning, but now I know the stuff inside out. So I just use not necessarily a starting point, but I know what I want to achieve. So I just I tweak the knobs before I even place through it. Before even reamp something. So I kind of know I'm going for like a thicker, denser, or in my terms, more purple than blue tone. I'm going to be raising the mids on the 5150, going to be raising the treble a bit and backing off the presence. And then I reamp, and I'm usually already there, pretty much. But that's just experience and me being a freak, I guess. I have no idea.
So Amrish is asking, and hey Amrish, what are your thoughts on compression on your guitar track / bus? How much loudness do you feel you need to dial in from the compressor versus manipulating the source loudness before it gets there?
On guitar tracks or a mix?
No, he meant guitar or guitar bus. So do you even compress your guitars?
No. Well, I never used to do that really. I just started doing it every now and then, actually because of, I think it was a Nail the Mix episode. I just did this little L2 thing and liked it for that particular mix I worked on.
Dude, limiting guitars. Dude, I got raised to never compress or limit guitars, and Joey and Joel taught me.
Oh, L1 it was not L2, sorry.
Yeah, L1, and man, it's a nice little trick.
It kind of does what I'm using this C4 a lot, another old Sneap trick, and it kind of does a similar thing. It kind of gets the low end in check on like woofy palm mutes and stuff like that.
Yeah,
I think it just makes the guitar sound tighter. Not even using it so much to control the dynamics, because the heavily distorted guitar tone is pretty. It doesn't have that much dynamics left in it. The only thing that is bouncing around is the low mids on palm mutes, and that's where like the C4 or an L1 or something like that can help. But usually I'm not really doing any. I'm never even using buses for my guitars. Like I'm not using any buses for anything really. Like obviously aux buses and effects buses, but I'm not really using groups as such. Not even for drums. Everything is just going straight into the mix output, into the main output.
That's the way to do it in Pro Tools if you want to not have any issues with delay compensation.
Yeah, I guess, yeah.
It's interesting because the Pro Tools guys that I learned from don't do that stuff either, and I don't know if they thought this through, but when I started trying to do a bunch of parallel this and auxes that, man, so many issues that you don't have in other DAWs. So I don't know if that style was developed as a response to that or not, but
I think it's often not even needed, and it's so easy to overdo things once you start working with buses. You EQ the individual tracks and then you EQ and compress the bus, and often it's not needed. You just do it like as a default. There's something, I have to put a compressor on it.
That makes perfect sense.
And especially with drums, I rarely ever use parallel compression. I just did it on 2 mixes just because I wanted to try it and liked it for those mixes. But I'm only using it when the recording is shit or when it's programmed drums. It helps to get out a bit more sustain and stuff and helps to smoothen out the cymbals. But when it's like properly recorded drums, I never even use parallel compression on the drums.
I feel like parallel is one of those things that if your stuff sounds like garbage, it's going to sound like garbage anyways.
Yeah. Yep.
So it's like if you want to add that extra 5% maybe that you feel it's missing and parallel's the way to go, cool. But it's not going to, it's not going to take a shitty mix and make it good.
No. For me, it's just a fix for problems. Like I said, programmed drums that don't sound coherent enough to me usually, even if you use the pseudo room mics. They can like benefit from a parallel drum compression bus just to get more sustain and more gel and glue.
Yeah, totally. So AJ Viana is asking, whoa, haven't seen that name since the Sneap Forum days. Love the mixing guide. So you haven't been looking, AJ. So the question is, do you have an internal checklist that you go to when you're getting a tone? Like when someone asks you to reamp, what's your first rig to try?
Depends. I usually ask them for references, not to copy the sound. That's not going to be possible anyways, just to get an idea where they're coming from and what they want to have. Then I ask them to send me a like if it's an outside job, to send me like a backing, bass and drums and stuff so I got something I can fit the guitars in, because it's not gonna help if the guitar tone sounds awesome by itself and then just it's not working in the mix. So if possible, I ask them to send me that. Yeah, and then again, I know my amps inside out, so when I know he's going for that kind of tone, I'm pretty quick at finding the right amp and mic and cabinet for that, I think.
And that's just experience, really.
Yeah.
Like we said before. So Eduardo is asking, well, honestly, you already answered this question. So Elidor is asking, how do you go about blending different mics, and do you prefer active versus passive pickups, or is it just depending on the situation?
Let's do the mic question first. Mics, I'm very careful about phase. So I do this I think it's the standard trick, just to put the amp in high gain mode. And so you get a nice like white noise kind of sound coming through the speakers. Invert the phase on one of the mics and I first place the first mic to be perfect. That's usually the 57. Like I said, if you don't get a great sound with just that, do something else. Start over, use a different guitar player or whatever. So yeah, I get that right first. Then I place the second mic, and then I flip the phase on that one. And just first, you have to make sure that you get the same level. So that's pretty much the only time I observe the meters and Pro Tools to get the same peak level. Then I move the mic around to get the most possible cancellation. Not left, right, but closer or further away from the speaker to get the most possible cancellation. And then I flip the phase back, and then you get the mics perfectly in phase. I might then check again, visually on the waveforms, but that's usually what I do. So then I got my main mic and just drive the other mic in until I like it. And that's where faders really help. You can do a lot of mixing with mouse and everything, but when it comes to blending two mics, you want to have a fader, because
absolutely,
that way you can just move one mic down while you're turning the other one up, so you're not going to get fooled by the increased volume or loudness.
Yeah, I agree. So O'Shea Hill is asking, how do you tame the high-end fizz of your tones? Is there a specific place to low pass, or is it more dependent on the cab type / mic position?
Cab, mic position, and amount of I don't care about fizz, because it's going to work in the mix.
There you go. We did kind of address that earlier.
Yeah.
So Nolan is asking, when stop reamping and say, okay, this tone is sick, I'll keep it in the mix. I spend too much time reamping over and over. Hold on, let me read this and try to understand it real quick, because it's written kind of weird.
While you do that, I'm just going to answer the other question that I forgot to finish, the active versus passive pickups.
Oh, yeah.
I'm an active guy, really. I prefer actives, but that's I think that's because I'm old. I'm 35 now, turning 36 in September. So I grew up with all the thrashy stuff, like really fast thrashy palm mutes. And you need absolute tightness, fast tracking low end for that. And a lot of passive pickups don't really do that for me. They sound great for the chords and for the big wall of sound kind of stuff, but when it comes to that's machine gun like attack, nothing beats the active pickups, like the EMG 81s and the Fishman Fluence, which are amazing. People hate them for being not that dynamic, but well, it's a metal mix. You don't want them to be extremely dynamic necessarily, because you're gonna fucking slap a tube scream on it to get that in check, to low pass and high pass and compress. So that's where active pickup helps. I'm not one of those, I hate passives. They work for me too, depending on the situation. But personally, with my style, I prefer actives.
Okay, Nolan is asking, when do you stop reamping and say, okay, this tone is sick, I'll keep it in the mix? I spend too much time reamping over and over, using a reference track every time, and I get a good tone, but I can't stop myself and say, okay, it's done.
Commit as early as possible. When I blend mics, for example, I'm committing as early as possible in the process. I guess you have to have some degree of self-confidence and experience to be able to do that, but I think it's the way to go. If the tone is there, if it's right, don't fuck with it.
We talk about this a lot too on this podcast and Nail the Mix and stuff, and commit. That's one of the most important things you can do to get better, is to commit. I know lots of guys do the opposite of commit. They'll try to mix with their drum instrument live, all their synths live, their amp sims live, and they'll work on the same song for a year and never commit anything. It's that's keeping you back. The sooner you can commit, the sooner you're going to get better. Because if you make a bad decision, you're going to be committed to it, and you'll never make that bad decision again.
Yeah, and trust in your choices. If you think it's right, it probably is right. And for example, MIDI instruments, I'm never, as soon as I start a mix, I'm not going to have any active MIDI instruments in the mix anymore. It's all going to be printed.
Good. That's how it should be. I mean, unless you're, an exception or something, kind of like there's always an exception, but like in general, you should just commit.
Yeah. For example, now I'm just working on the new Power Quest stuff. It's like a power metal band from the UK. And they're using a lot of...
I never would have guessed with that name.
Yeah, right? So they're using a lot of keyboards, and then when I sent them the first rough mix, I still had, just to keep my options open, the instruments active, because they sent me what sounded a bit plasticky and fake, so I used like real sounding instruments, especially for the strings. And like expected, turns out they wanted to go for a more like that plasticky power metal sound. So I had to go back and choose a different sound. But that's for the first song. I just sent them the first song. Now everyone's happy. Now I'm just doing the same kind of thing for the other songs. So yeah, there are exceptions, but commit as early as possible. And trust me, and yeah, you, sorry, I just forgot your name, but you just said you're comparing it to reference mixes, which is always good, but don't compare guitars to guitars if the mix isn't similar.
Yeah, when you're doing when you're listening to a reference or A-Bing, you shouldn't be listening for that. You should be going for a general balance level, going for like the big picture. Like, is my low end as big as this one?
Right.
Or you're not like, does my guitar tone match a guitar tone from a whole other production?
Exactly. It's never going to work.
No, definitely not. So Sean McHenry's asking, do you have any thoughts on Randall heads?
Yeah, I like them. Definitely. I've got some of the old stuff, the V2 and the T2 Heaven and Hell, the old Gus G model. And I actually like them a lot. I'm not one of those. Those are tube preamps and solid state power amps. And I'm not much of a purist when it comes to that. When it works and sounds great, it sounds great. And the new stuff, which was designed by Mike Fortin, is great as well, because, Mike is a fucking wizard when it comes to amp circuits. I've got a few of his modded Marshalls, and yeah, he's insane.
Man, when my band first started touring, we toured with Goat Whore a lot, and they used Randall. Sammy used Randall heads and cabs. I don't know if he still does, but he had like the Pantera stuff.
Yeah.
Man, it sounded incredible. Holy shit.
Crowbar, same thing. They sound massive as fuck when you see them live. They use the old RG 100, whatever it is, the old solid state heads. Mm-hmm. And damn, do they sound massive live. It just works for them.
A lot of that's Sammy. Sammy's like a god of tone.
Yeah.
So Nick Matsky is asking, do you have a go-to brand of picks?
Yes, I'm very anal when it comes to little details like that. And the pick definitely does have an influence on tone. So, yeah, you have to kind of take that into consideration. I used to use stone picks because they just sounded amazing, but they're so expensive and I'll lose them all the time and they're a bit tough to get used to, and you have to have a perfect pick angle, because if you angle them a bit too much, you get the scratchy sound from the windings on the lower strings. Now I'm using the John Petrucci Jazz 3s, because they're the perfect size between the Jazz 3, which are great for leads but not so great for rhythms, for me at least, because I keep touching the string with my index finger then. And the big ones I don't like as much for leads, so I'm using the Petrucci ones, and they're amazing. They're like sharp, pointy, and right size, and the material sounds good too. And when it comes to sound, I also like the Ultex ones, those like amber colored Dunlop picks. And it's important, thick. I like thick picks.
I love those. I actually like thinner picks for strumming parts.
Yeah, well, for strumming, yes. You don't want to have the individual tick, 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 tick going over the strings then. You just want more like a blur wall of sound, right? I used to play in a black metal band when I was like 18, 19, something like that. And I used really thin pick back then, because it was just like strumming and fast, shreddy chords.
Yeah, it makes sense for that. So I'm going to combine these two questions into one, because they kind of go together. This is by Martin and Derek. Could you describe your process of getting high-quality DI tracks? Use a DI box, or do you go direct into a pre, and how much of a difference does that make?
It definitely does make a difference.
It doesn't, or does?
It does. It does make a difference.
Yeah, I agree.
And I've done a lot of shootouts. Nowadays, I can't really be arsed anymore because I just know which DI box works for me and which doesn't. It depends a bit on active and passive pickups as well. Actives aren't as picky. Also with like long cable leads, and actives are just much more forgiving when it comes to stuff like that. For bass guitar, I'm using a Bootsy Collins modded BAE MP1073 preamp, which is like a Neve flavor mic pre, and it's got the Bootsy Collins mod on the instrument input. Sounds massive. It's got like really tight but huge low end. For guitars, I used to use it's pretty much a standard, the Type 85 Countryman, and I've now moved to the 2 Notes Engineering Torpedo Reload, which is now my reamp box as well. I went from I had the Yax amp radio, then the Great Little Labs Red Eye, I think it was called, and now just the Reload for everything.
Interesting. I love the Red Eye.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
I think it sounds better than the Countryman.
I agree.
It's more headroom.
Yeah, I agree.
And last question, this is from Paul, and what's your approach to creating Kemper profiles and cab IRs? Let me just say, we don't need to talk about that for 30 minutes.
All right.
Because that's kind of like could teach a whole class on that.
Get a great guitar tone. You have to like it in the room. You have to like to record it, listen to it through the microphone. If that's great, you just want to get it into the Kemper. So, Kemper it, push a button, and it does the whole kind of thing. And then refine it. And, refining is where it's a bit more important, obviously. But I've got my own little riff that I'm playing. For me, it's important to have a lot of low-end content going into the amp when you refine it. So a lot of slow, deep palm mutes to get the low end right in the profile.
And what about IRs?
I just use Blend IR from 2 Notes. It's a free software you can download off their page, and it does everything automatically. You don't get it in waveform then, just in their TUUC. I don't know what the format is, but I'm using it in my Torpedo Live anyway, so I'm using that. I did create some IRs for the XFX and like other stuff, which is Wave, and I just used the Apple's what's it called? It's one of those utilities in Apple on a Mac. It just comes with it, I think, or did it come with Logic? I have no idea.
IR watch. I don't know.
I don't know, but just look it up. It's the Apple one that just comes with whatever software. I guess I could just check it out with you. I think you use it to create impulses for the Space Designer, and that's what I used. Fairly simple. It just tells you what to do. Yeah.
And that's it. Boom. Dude, thank you so much for talking with me about all this stuff, and thanks for sharing so much.
Thank you for having me. Always happy to talk about gear and amps, and rather difficult to get me stop.
I think I've had a great time. I mean, we normally go about an hour, but this one's almost 90 minutes, so
damn,
a good long episode full of content. So
cool. Yeah, thanks to everyone for the questions and for even like listening to me ramble on for an hour and a half.
Do you want to plug your YouTube channel?
Oh yeah, it's just search for my name, Lasse Lammert, and it's also the address is just youtube.com/Lasse Lammert, and I've got all the comparisons on there, and subscribe and check my stuff out. Thumbs up if you like it.
Great. Well, thanks, dude, and we'll talk again soon.
Thank you, man. Take care.
The Unstoppable Recording Machine Podcast is brought to you by 2 Notes Audio Engineering. 2 Notes is a leader in the market for low box, cabinet, and mic simulators. Gone are the days of having ISO rooms or having to record an amp at ear-bleeding volumes to capture that magic tone. The Torpedo Live, Reload, and Studio allow you to crank your amp up as loud as you want, but record silently. Check out www.2-notes.com for more info. To ask us questions, make suggestions, and interact, visit nailthemix.com/podcast and subscribe today.